everybody, it is Romania Black, and we are on chapters 23 through 26 this week of Scum Villain's Self-Saving System. Yes, four chapters this week, and 4 chapters next week, and we will be done with volume 1 already. It's a weird place to be. I don't know. I can't remember. I honestly cannot remember how many different parts there were in Modao Zushi's first volume, but I'm pretty sure that maybe there were 8 or 9. I thought for some reason there was like 11 parts to Heaven Official's Blessings first volume, and that was a much longer series, so we're almost a fourth of the way done through the series. What? I don't know how to feel about that. I really don't. Especially because this series compared to Modao Zushi and Heaven Official's Blessing, I'm like, after this chapter and possibly next week, I will be completely in the dark with what's to come. Completely. Like I said a few weeks ago, I felt like with Heaven Official's Blessing, even though after the first volume, I was like, I don't really know what's going to happen yet. I still felt like they were prefacing some things that were to come, and you kind of had maybe a little bit of a timeline, even if it didn't entirely go with the timeline at all. You kind of had an expectation. Here, the only thing is like, there's this moment and then the end. It's like, and now that we know that things aren't going to go the way that Shin Qingqiu thinks that they're going to go, I'm like, what's all this in between nonsense? So I'm completely in the dark, and I'm excited by that, but I'm also terrified. So we're going to be diving into chapters 23, 24, 25, and 26 today. And we're nearing where the donghua ended, so it's like, what else are we going to do? So it's no man's land, and I'm kind of excited by it. So I do have a couple comments I want to touch base on before we start this segment, though. Angry is a Panda and several others, but Angry is a Panda is the main one that I looked at, talked about the age gap between Shin Qingqiu and Lo Binghe, and we've talked about it a bit in the discussion, but I did like what they pointed out about the age gap, in that in their mind it's okay because Shin Qingqiu didn't fall in love except with the adult version of Luo Binghe, who comes later on in the story. And I think that that's honestly, for me, I'm in total agreement with that. I think that's what keeps me okay with it all overall, is because even though on Binghe's side, there is like flirting everywhere, and Shin Qingqiu just goes over the head. He doesn't think that Luo Binghe even has that going on. But on Shin Qingqiu's side, he's not really looking at Binghe as, being someone that he has a romantic interest in, but we know that he probably kind of has a crush on the adult Binghe, and so he's like, this is not right, but later on. So I think I agree with you. I think that helps make it okay, because he's not actively trying to like stalk a kid throughout this part of the story. So I agree with you on that comment. User Pari 2005 talks about that the story was published around 2014, which was like a decade ago. Isn't that crazy? I didn't realize it was that long ago, but that makes sense because of when Heaven Official's Blessing and Modao Zushi was published, so that all kind of adds up. A decade ago when this story came out is crazy. Crazy. But they were like, maybe you identify with Shin Qingqiu, because if this was published a decade ago and Shin Yan was in his 20s then, that means he'd probably be in his 30s now, which means he probably grew up in the 90s, which means he was a millennial. And I was like, oh my God, he's a millennial. It was like a bunch of lights suddenly went off, like ding, 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 ding. Like the jackpot sign lit up, and I was like, oh, he's a millennial. That's why we relate so much. I relate to Shin Qingqiu because he's a millennial like me. So, User Puri, you are very correct. I am all for this theory. I think you're onto something there. So that was pretty cool. Chibi Reiko talked about how making food is a trope in Eastern novels, and it can range in meaning from a lot of things, from being tied to a confession or a proposal to even being signs that you're going to be married to that person, which we can do all sorts of things with that. But cooking, and basically the idea behind it, is that if you're married to someone, you typically cook for each other every day because you're always around each other. And I'm like, oh, that's really cool. I like that. I like the meaning behind that. I think the sentiment is really nice. I think it fits really well with Binghe and Shin Qingqiu's dynamic. So that's really cool. So thank you, Chibi Reiko, for pointing that out. And then Anime Annie talks about a couple things. One, that possibly Shin Ching-cho is striking out possibilities because the person that, you know, Lo Bing-hye, he wouldn't call. Okay, basically they're talking about how Shin Ching-cho's like narrowing down possibilities of what could happen based on what he knows from the past with Lo Bing-hye. And I'm like, okay, that makes sense. But also, I agree with Anime Annie in them finding the fact that Liu Qingjae is the only one that really calls Shin Ching. The fact that it's Liu Qingjae, the one who's died in the OG novel, they're the one that recognizes that something's up with Shin Ching-cho's character and that they're a little bit off. I find that hilarious because, yeah, they're not even supposed to be there. She doesn't even go here. Like, you know, and it's just so funny to me. And he's kind of like, he's literally the dead man, but also the quote unquote straight man in this situation. And I'm not talking about their heterosexuality or homosexuality or whatever. I'm talking about like a straight man in a dynamic is often referred to as the one that's more like serious or deadpan or without personality. And so that's kind of Liu Qingjae's role in this story, which is funny to me because, yeah, he's not even supposed to be here. And now he's here and he's the one noticing something's off. And everybody else is acting like everything's fine. I'm like, oh, that's so funny. So I thought those comments were really good. I appreciate that. Next week, when we finish out the book, I am going to look at the index. I'm going to ask the moderators about it first to make sure it's okay. And I might, depending on how long this segment takes, because it's 4 chapters, I am trying to record ahead a little bit. So I may or may not reach the comments from the last couple chapters, and I may go ahead and read next week if it's looking like it's going to take me an amount of time, because I'll have time to do it. So just bear with me, but I will get to your comments. Don't worry, even if it means getting to those comments by the time we start volume 2, which they're sitting there on that shelf, but I'll be honest, I've had those books for a long time now, like a year, and I just put them on that shelf and I've never touched them. So I don't know what the cover looks like. I don't know. The volume 4 is the special edition. It's still got like the plastic wrap on it. I haven't even unsealed it yet. So, so there's that. I do want to make note, I guess before we start this, talking about the spine, because with these English editions, they always have like a little symbol on the spine. This one is the fan, which it's Shin Ching-cho's fan. So, of course it is. I think that that's really cool to have it there. I like it. It's great. But yeah, into No Man Land we go. I'm super excited, but I'm also like, I don't know. Maybe we won't get to No Man's Land this chapter. We're getting really close to catching up. So I feel like this set of chapters, we may go through everything leading up to the spiders, the spider butt monsters. We may get through everything leading up to that. And then next week will be No Man's Land, but it's here. And I don't know what to do with it, so. But thank you all so much for your comments, for your kindness, and I'm ready to dive in, y'all. Let's see what we get. So, with that being said, we are going to start Scum Villain's Self-Saving System, chapters 23 through 26, and we're going to do that here in 3, 2, 1, and let's adjust my mic. And let's go. So when we last left off, Bing-hye was traveling with the girls from the other sect, and we're getting to see what's going to happen here. The girl was graceful and elegant, but she walked with a slight limp, like she had sprained her ankle. It was probably an injury she had sustained while fighting monsters. Oh, Luo Shizhong, I truly apologize, she said. You saved us, and now we're troubling you. If you weren't protecting us, you'd be so far ahead already, a we're burden. We're all cultivators. It's our obligation to look after each other, Luo Bing-hye said, eminently proper. Shin Ching-cho had come to know Luo Bing-hye's early stage White Lotus mindset like the back of his hand, and he didn't find this strange. Talk about that in the discussion. His student was fighting monsters while also looking after this crowd of weaker fighters, women and young disciples. Hence, he hadn't shot up in the rankings. Otherwise, with his ability, he would have already effortlessly defeated Gong Yijiao. Even Ming Fong ranked higher than Luo Bing-hye right now. But it didn't matter. Luo Bing-hye would have a second win. My disciple is the most awesome in the world. Oh my god. If he weren't so good, so kind, and so easy to take advantage of, none of you could ever dream of defeating him. Shin Qingqiu never thought to reflect on what this agitated attitude of his meant. Yeah, I love that he's just like, okay, so going back, Lo, Shin Qingqiu is not taking into account that Lo Binghe has, he's been influenced by Shin Qingqiu. So yeah, he may have been nice in the OG version, but he was also kind of hell-bent on revenge against Shin Qingqiu. But since that's not an aspect now, it allows for all of the kindness to kind of expand even further. And Shin Qingqiu is like, he not only doesn't realize that impact, but then he's like, why am I standing up for him so much? I'm like, because you like him. Just Yu Qingyong smiled. Qingqiu, that little disciple of yours has great moral character. Shin Qingqiu smiled behind his open fan, quietly accepting the compliment. Qingqi humphed. Exactly. It's impossible to tell that he was the one who taught the boy. She's onto it too. Not as much as Liu Qingge, but she's onto it too. Other observers said a few additional words of praise. However, they weren't necessarily sincere. What use was good moral character? The Immortal Alliance Conference valued power. In their eyes, Lo Binghe's actions seemed rather childish. But when Han Hua's palace's old palace master, sitting by Shin Qingqiu's side, saw Lo Binghe's face through the crystal mirror, he let out a barely audible "eh," and almost stood up. Shin Qingqiu didn't glance over, but he understood well enough. Lo Binghe was beautiful, and he looked quite like his birth mother. The old palace master had seen this face, and thinking the junior disciple's similar appearance only coincidental, he became nostalgic about his own favorite. He could scarcely have imagined that Lo Binghe was the child of precisely that beloved lost pupil. Oh, okay, so a couple thoughts here. And I know back in the discussion we might talk about this, but I might as well say it now in case if I forget. But one, back during the donghua, I thought that when the palace master sat up, he was thinking that Lo Binghe looked like his dad, who, we find out is the demon. No, he was thinking about his mom. And I was like, oh, okay, that all makes sense. Or at least I think that's what I thought, but that all makes sense now too. Two, I'm curious if the Abyss, because everybody's making a comment here about Binghe being slightly childish or immature because he's very trusting and naive and kind. I'm wondering if part of the purpose of the Abyss and Shin Qingqiu kicking him down is to show him that he needs to be more aware. Not necessarily that he doesn't need to be kind, but he needs to not be taken advantage of by others, and he needs to strengthen up. So I'm wondering if that's going to be kind of the lesson that Binghe learns from the Abyss. I don't know. On the other side, in Zhu de Gorge, Lo Binghe was calmly considering what to do with this crowd of vulnerable disciples, which is where we're at in the donghua. From a moral standpoint, he couldn't just abandon them. They were from Huanhua Palace and had barely started training. But he also didn't want to miss the chance to shine in the Immortal Alliance Conference and win honor for Shizun. Everything's for Shizun! As Lo Binghe was mulling over how to extricate himself from the situation, Shin Qingqiu thought he was rolling around with the maidens and making sparks fly. Oh my god, no! That's not what's happening! There was the first maiden to sleep with Lo Binghe. Qin Wanyu. Oh, Wanyu and Wanrong. Yes, Qin Wanru, the graceful and subdued little Shime. Oh, so Wanyu is the one who sleeps with him. Oh, well, that's not what ends up happening. The biggest impression this maiden had left on Shin Qingqiu was her role in helping Lo Binghe lose his virginity. Oh, she's the one that gets poisoned. Oh, later, her role was to be a victim in the constant harem intrigue. Only someone as special as airplane shooting towards the sky could manage to occasionally write a stallion's novel harem more in the flavor of The Legend of Xin Huan. What is Xin Huan? It says, English name, Empress in the Palace, is a 2011 television series centered on harem scheming and infighting. Oh my god, so MXTX is not only making references to Harry Potter, but also making references to, dramas at the time. This definitely feels like a first-time author using, pop culture examples and getting away with it, so interesting. I'd rather read 10,000 words describing how ghost head spiders mate than read about Xia Hualing tearing into Qin Wanyu. Thank you. Oh, because Xia Hualing in the book has interest in him as well. Oh, yeah. I think I would agree with you on that, Shin Qingqiu. Although the ghost head spiders are really gross, so I don't know about that. What level of AO3 is he on? I feel like there's like the 9 circles of hell in AO3. Like Shin Chingcho's willing to go to level 8 before reading that. Watching this parade of people trailing close behind Lo Binghe, treating him like their personal savior, Shin Chingcho grew unhappy. Some of these disciples honestly hadn't acclimated and couldn't yet demonstrate their skills. They would be fine after a little more time to adjust, but some were truly ignorant and incompetent, yet they refused to back out of the competition. They wanted to ride Lo Binghe's coattails, so they could fumble together some beads and rise in the ranking. If this were the black-hearted Lo Binghe, he'd have slaughtered them all in seconds without even blinking. People sure do take advantage of kindness, huh? See, there is a difference there. They pressed forward for a while, and every low-level monster that leapt from the darkness to attack them was eliminated with pretty much only flicks of Lo Binghe's fingers. His sword never left his sheath, yet he still couldn't pick up the pace. Why? A female disciple from Huahuan Palace leaned on Qin Wanyu and began to hiccup and cry, "Oh, Zhe, my feet hurt so much." In front, Lo Binghe stopped, but he didn't turn around. He lowered his head and rubbed his temples. Nervous, Qin Wanyu lowered her head and spoke quietly to the girl. "Wanrong, endure it for a little bit longer, all right? We have to walk a little faster." "But my feet really hurt. I can't walk anymore," Wanrong Mei whined. "We've been walking all day and it's nowhere to take a bath. I'm so uncomfortable." A number of untrained disciples in the group agreed, one after another. If Shin Chingcho had been the one in charge, he would have long since revoked their right to participate and kicked them out of the Judy Gorge. If your feet are so delicate, don't sign up for the Immortal Alliance Conference. Get some sensible footwear. And if you do, then whatever, but why drag others down? Look at Liu Mingyan. The difference between you is vast. No wonder she's the #1 female protagonist. Someone didn't get their footwear in order. But there was nothing he could do about Qin Wanrong. After all, the beautiful sisters Qin Wanyu and Qin Wanrong were members of Lo Binghe's harem. Therefore, according to universal convention, no matter how dedicatedly they dug their own graves, they wouldn't die. Ooh, so he thinks. Shin Chingcho's heart filled with a strange annoyance. "Lo Binghe, you... in the future, when you're gathering your harem, can you put more thought into the quality? Don't welcome just any decent looking girl into your arms. The inconsistency in your harem standards makes this master's heart hurt for you." Oh my god, he's basically like, can you just have higher standards? Oh my god. Qin Wanyu sent another look at Lo Binghe's back. "Little sister," she said quietly, "we've already made a lot of trouble for Lo Zhejiang." She still wanted to rely on Lo Binghe and try to make a name for herself in the Immortal Alliance Conference and earn some reputation. If her sister foolishly annoyed Lo Binghe, it would go badly for her. "Lo Zhejiang is such a good person, he won't mind," Qin Wanrong said innocently. "Isn't that right, Lo Zhejiang?" Lo Binghe had finally turned, a faint smile still on his face, peerlessly handsome, utterly faultless, and did not speak. But for some reason, Qin Wanyu inwardly shivered in fear. It's interesting, yeah, the sparks aren't flying at this point. Instead, he's just like, I can't impress Shizun while I'm with you girls, but I'm gonna be nice, because that's what my master taught me. Oh. However, Qin Wanrong had cotton for brains and took his smile as acquiescence. Singing a carefree tune, she swept over to a nearby creek like a gust of wind. "It's coming!" Shin Chingcho's gaze tensed. Lo Binghe started. Given what she'd just said, he thought she was going to bathe. Fortunately, this little girl wasn't that eccentric, and she only shook off her shoes and socks to dip her feet into the creek. Those were the river's upper reaches. What if someone downstream wanted to drink? Shin Chingcho mentally lit a candle for any such unlucky disciples. Oh yeah, because she stuck her foot in the water, right? That's so gross. A number of other disciples soon followed Qin Wanrong's example, and just like that, the little crowd started to laugh and play. Lo Binghe was completely helpless as he watched. It would have been awkward to approach them, so he could only call from far away. "Waiting in the water at night isn't safe. It's best if we finish and leave right away." Shin Chingcho felt this was a bit odd. In the original novel, surely Lo Binghe hadn't stood so far away. He didn't think he'd remembered wrong. At this time, Lo Binghe, out of worry or out of Great Master Airplane shooting towards the skies' selfish desire to write fan service, went to the creek with the others. Then he enjoyed the alluring show of all the women slowly rolling down their stockings. Textbook foot fetish material. Lo Binghe pleaded with the disciples, but a few had even crossed to the other side of the creek, chatting and laughing. Oh, it's all right, Lo Shizhong, you come too. Even the sect leaders, watching through the crystal mirrors, were speechless. Shin Qingsho still had no expression on his face. Lo Binghe, you still won't go. If you don't, you'll miss the plot. Chen Wanrong knew. Wan Yu knew her little sister was being rather inappropriate, and she cautiously apologized to Lo Binghe. Oh, Lo Shizhong, I'm so sorry, she said. This is the first time Shimei and the others are participating in the Immortal Alliance conference. Truly lovable and pitiful. She bit her lip like she was making an excruciating decision. If Lo Shizhong feels burdened, leave us and go. It's all right. These words, together with that expression on the verge of tears, were wildly insincere. But after hearing her plea, any man with a bare minimum of virtue would find himself unable to do as she suggested. Which is like, but Lo Binghe was probably going to reply, but before Lo Binghe could reply, an ear-piercing scream came from the creek. His face suddenly changed and he shoved Shin Wan Yu out of the way, whose beautiful face had lost all color as he dashed towards the creek's bank. The audience watching from the crystal mirror stood in terror. What's going on? Lo Binghe asked in a forceful voice, his sword before him. 5 or 6 disciples had been washing their feet and playing in the creek. Now 2 of them had disappeared. One of the missing was Chen Wanrong. You see? Told you should have gone earlier. Wonderful. A perfectly good wife is now gone, just like that, Shin Qingsho thought, frustrated and disappointed. Now you can't complete the Shin sisters' banquet bouquet for that grand threesome scene in the future. Now what? 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 Well, so we're not having a threesome later. Moreover, despite everything, he'd never thought that a member of the protagonist's harem could actually get herself killed. I don't know what happened, a disciple screamed. The water suddenly turned black, and Shiji and the other were swept away by something. So man, they made the donghua a little bit more epic. Lo Binghe rapidly dragged the stupefied disciple still in the creek up onto the bank. But just as he reached out to grab the last person, they fell over like they'd lost their footing. Everyone stared as the water closed over the disciple's head and they disappeared with their eyes wide open. At the same time, black smog billowed through the creek. Shin Qingsho peered through the crystal mirror. The smog was actually countless black strands, smooth and silky like a woman's dark hair. From between the strands seeped scarlet blood diluted by the creek water. They were thicker and more disgusting than Sadako's hair. Someone on the dais cried in shock, "Oh, New Yon-chan!" In Judy Gorge, Lo Binghe had quickly identified the monster in the creek as well. He sent sword glares into the water as he cried, "Get far away from the water! It's the demon realm's New Yon-chan!" For a while, the billows and billows of the hair-like demonic creature's body swirled in the water. Suddenly, like they were burping up a full meal, the black strands spat out a few objects with a stream of bubbles. 3 bodies that had been sucked clean of flesh and blood, leaving only drenched corpses of skin and bone. The pores on the dead bodies were abnormally large. That was because many strands of hair were still attached to their skin, thrust into their pores, hungrily sucking out the body's remaining flesh, blood, and spiritual essence. Leaving no pore uninvaded, diving into any opening it could find, this was one of New Yon-chan's most terrifying characteristics. This scene scared the disciples by the creek witless. Wails and screams filled the forest as they threw themselves behind Lo Binghe to hide. At the sight of the horrible state of her sister's body, Chen Wanyu nearly fainted. Luckily, she was smart enough not to faint for real. Otherwise, in all this chaos, who would bother to help her escape? Oh, and it says, a ghostly character who appeared in the Japanese horror movie Ringu. Oh, famous for her long, bed-raggled black hair which obscured her face. Oh, you mean to tell me that this monster's based off The Ring? MXTX, what you doing? Well, so there are some differences from the donghua that we'll address in the discussion, but okay. Chapter 24. New Yon-chan was an amphibious creature. After sucking 3 people dry underwater, it was itching to climb the bank and search for new targets. Lo Binghei's expression was icily severe. He snapped his fingers, igniting a burst of flames at his fingertips. Then, boosting the flames with spiritual energy, he flicked them towards the lurking demonic beast. As soon as they touched the beast's hair-like strands, the flames flared into an inferno, forcing the black mass of hair to retreat into the water and with all speed, leaving it afraid to come back onto the bank. Lo Binghei executed this set of actions in a single smooth sequence, radiating formidable might, utterly relentless. Shin Qingqiu internally held up a sign. 10 points to Lo Binghei! Lo Binghei picked up the night pearl that Qin Wanyu had dropped in her panic and raised it high. Like a shining beacon, it calmed everyone's hearts. Don't stray! Stay together! He shouted. Then he took out a piece of the standard equipment all participants had been given, a rescue firework, and fired it into the sky. The rescue fireworks were given to disciples to call for help if they encountered a monster and they were unable to handle. The Immortal Alliance Conference hadn't released any excessively dangerous monsters, and if a participant fired a rescue firework 3 times, they automatically forfeited their right to participate. Therefore, in all past conferences, no one had really used the fireworks unless they were really backed into a corner. However, at that moment, glittering bursts of fireworks rose one after another over the sky of Judy Gorge. This should have been a beautiful scene, but at that moment, not only did these fireworks not seem gorgeous, they made the onlookers' insides twist in fear. Every blossoming firework represented a disciple who had encountered an exceedingly dreadful monster, whose life was in danger. The crystal mirrors! Look at the crystal mirrors! Blood-curdling shrieks and wails of distress came in an unending stream from the mirrors. Some disciples were already corpses on the ground. Some were still struggling, soaked with blood, gazes full of terror. Why? Why here? There shouldn't be. Someone help! Shifu, save me! Shige, save! A hoarse cry burst from one mirror, followed by the mournful shriek of a spirit eagle. The picture went out, becoming a flat black screen. Everyone stared, uncomprehending. What's going on? That hoarse cry had definitely been the cry of a demon realm bone eagle, a type of aerial demonic beast that was as fierce as it was bloodthirsty. It had no doubt torn apart the spirit eagle, shattering its crystal to dust. Beasts that swarm in the water, beasts that walked on land, beasts that flew through the air. These fierce demonic entities had absolutely not been part of the conference's plan. Though Shin Qingqiu had mentally prepared for this long ago, as he watched the all-encompassing scene of chaos play out before him, his scalp went numb and his fingers chilled. He realized he would be unable to do as he expected. He couldn't just pretend he was watching the climax of an ultra-realistic show. Ooh, we're going to talk about that. Outside Judy Gorge, a pandemonium had broke out on the dais. Tian Yi Temple's cultivators said sternly, well, what's happening? The demonic beasts chosen for the Immortal Alliance Conference were determined via strict rules and meticulous selection. How could something like New Yan Chan, which resides only in the demon realm, find its way in? Many Huanhua Palace disciples had already died. The old palace master shot to his feet. Open the barrier! My dog is like, please. The giant barrier over Judy Gorge was supported by nearly 100 monks from the Zhaohua Monastery. The Zhaohua Monastery abbot immediately began to cast a long-distance voice transferal spell to tell the monks to release the barrier. You cannot! Yu Qingyan said. The old palace master started. Well, sect leader Yu, what is the meaning of this? Over 100 of the Sangchong mountain disciples were in Judy Gorge, yet Yu Qingyan refused to open the barrier to let the trapped escape. Obviously, he had an exceptional reason. Shin Qingqiu had long since figured it out. He responded in Yu Qingyang's place. Once you release the barrier, the disciples will be able to escape, but so will the demonic beasts trapped within. They will scatter. There are villages only a few kilometers from here. The situation would become even more grave. Sect members and disciples at least have the ability to contend with the beasts, but the common people have no spiritual energy at all. No elder or sect leader on the platform had words to retort, and they fell into a dead silence. At this time, no matter how great one's cultivation, core formation, or nascent soul stage, or anything in between, there was no way to reverse the course of events. If we cannot open the barrier to let them out, then what should we do? Asked a cultivator at a loss. If they can't leave, then we must enter, said Liu Qingge. I love that it's him that says it. The members of the Sangzhong Mountain exchanged a look in tacit agreement. Fellow cultivators, Yu Qingyan said gravely, someone must be behind today's incident. They hope to use these demonic beasts to wipe out the new talent of the cultivation world, eliminating its future pillars in one fell swoop. For now, we can only maintain the barrier. But are there any of our fellow cultivators willing to enter the gorge with Sangjiang Mountains to clear out the demonic beasts and rescue the participating disciples? To carve a path of blood into the gorge, clearing out all the demonic beasts, would require not only martial power, but a great deal of courage. The old palace master was the first to respond. It would dishonor Huanhua Palace to refuse. This is interesting because the donghua makes the old palace master seem really suspicious, but here when you find out that a lot of other people have died, it doesn't seem that way in this. No. Huanhua Palace had sent the most participants to this year's conference and had the most invested in as well. They were the party least able to take the loss. Once someone took the lead, the others followed, volunteering one after another. Even if a scant few cowards were in the crowd, by now they had been reminded that their own precious, talented disciples were also trapped. Xin Qingqiu stepped forward, ready to stand with the group volunteering to provide assistance, when Liu Qingge also stepped forward slightly and used his sword sheath to block Xin Qingqiu's way. Expression unchanging, Xin Qingqiu pushed the sheath aside with 2 fingers. What is the meaning of this? You're poison, Liu Qingge said succinctly. That's right, Yu Qingyan agreed. Your ailment from without a cure has yet to be resolved. Entrust the safety of Qijing Peak's disciples to us. If Xin Qingqiu's condition suddenly acted up after he encountered Judy Gorge and his spiritual energy stalled while he was surrounded by swarms of demonic beasts, then neither heaven nor earth would be able to help him. Xin Qingqiu shook his head. How can a master hide and relax on a dais while his disciples are in danger? If I can't even protect my own disciples, I don't deserve to be the Peak Lord of Qijing Peak. Also, he was a vital character who needed to trigger a crucial plot point. If he wasn't on the scene, they couldn't keep filming, you know? Ding dong! System notification. Making the villain more three-dimensional by crafting an honorable image. B points plus 30. Xin Qingqiu internally rolled his eyes. Are you handing me a piece of candy before you stab me? Yu Qingyang had failed to dissuade him, as had everyone else. Then you must be careful, he said reluctantly. If you can't manage it, you must use a voice transferal spell to call us for help. Xin Qingqiu wasn't so pessimistic about his ability to handle demonic beasts. His confidence in his own cultivation and spiritual power aside, his interest in the demonic beasts of proud immortal Demon Way had far surpassed his interest in all those flavors of women. I mean, he might not have had remembered where any given female protagonist liked to go stargazing with Lo Binghe after being slighted, and he sometimes was unable to match names to characters, but he definitely remembered every demonic beast's attributes and weaknesses with exacting clarity. His knowledge of the plot aside, if you had to call something Xin Qingqiu's golden finger, it could only be this. Oh, okay. So the fact that he knows everything about monsters, he could defeat monsters. That's his golden finger. Interesting. We'll talk about this. In Judy Gorge, Lo Binghe had just calmed a crowd of terror-stricken junior disciples. In this sort of situation, they couldn't afford to fall into disarray. If they encountered a new demonic beast or any of them strayed off, the situation would only grow more disastrous. The night wind whipped by, carrying wails and howls from all around. It was impossible to tell if they came from human or demonic throats. The faint-hearted were already curled up and sobbing, and Qin Wanyu's face was deathly pale. But at the sight of Lo Binghe leaning against a tree, Zhang Yang clasped hilt up within his crossed arms, calm yet alert, protecting them against any attacks that came from the darkness. She couldn't stop the trace of tender fondness welling up from within her. If Xin Qingqiu were there, he would have grown incredibly excited, his gossip's soul on fire. Oh, girl, you've fallen in love with him! Suddenly, rustling noises came from the nearby shrubbery. Lo Binghe's gaze sharpened, and he gathered spiritual energy in his palm, ready to strike. The rustling in the brush. Are we almost here? Are we almost at? We're only in chapter 24. Oh! Oh! The rustling in the brush grew louder and louder, closer and closer. Everyone's hearts climbed into their throats. Perhaps they were terrified beyond belief because not a single person let out a scream. Suddenly there was a plop, like someone had collapsed to the ground. A round object rolled out of the bushes. It was a human head. Both of the head's eyes were tightly closed, its face covered in blood, its hair disheveled like a chicken's nest. Normally, this sight would have been frightening, but at present a harmless corpse head was much better than a man-eating demonic beast, so quite a few disciples even sighed in relief. Does anyone know which sect this Shizhong belonged to? Anybody missing a head? So, Qin Wanyu asked, her voice trembling. Disciples from the various sects stepped closer to check, but one after another, they all sighed in relief. No, not one of ours. I've never seen him before. Lo Binghe gazed into the dark depths of the shrubbery, thinking, if the head was here, the body was also nearby. It'd be better to go check its sect uniform. He strengthened the spiritual flow in his palm and walked into the dark. As expected, a stiff corpse lay beyond the shrubbery wearing aqua blue cultivator robes, one of the Tianyi Temple's newly accepted disciples. Lo Binghe saw only the hem of his robes before sighing. Newly accepted disciples like this one, only came to the Immortal Alliance Conference to gain experience. They had never imagined that they'd be drawn into such an unpredictable catastrophe and lose their lives. He looked up further and suddenly froze in shock. There was still a perfectly good head on top of the corpse's neck. Then, where had the other head come from? Zhang Yang had already left his sheath before Lo Binghe doubled back. As its white light overflowed, he yelled, "Get away from the head!" Before he finished speaking, the head lying quietly askew on the ground suddenly opened its eyelids. It met the disciples' gaze with wide, glowering eyes. Then 8 spindly spider legs, segmented and barbed, stretched forth from somewhere at the bottom of its neck, and it leapt up in a single bound. The closest person couldn't dodge in time, and the monster jumped onto the disciple's head. With a crazed howl, the disciple drew his sword and wildly swung it around, forcing everyone nearby to hurriedly duck away. Lo Binghe dared not attack it carelessly in case he stabbed the disciple's head instead of the monster. The result would be too horrible to imagine. The sensation of something so terrifying crawling back and forth on your head would be enough to frighten anyone to death. In complete despair, the disciple changed the direction of his sword and swung it towards his own head. Before he could strike, the 8 spindly spider legs had found their target and ferociously speared into his temples. He instantly went stiff, and like his tongue had twisted into knots, he was unable to yell a single word. The spider legs sticking into that human head bored deeper and deeper. Oh my God! And the disciple's whole body began to twitch unceasingly. After only a moment, the 8 legs drew back out, leaving nothing but twin rows of gory holes in his temple. Everything within his skull had been sucked clean, leaving it completely empty. This scene was utterly horrible. Even Lo Binghe remained frozen for a while, unable to react. Having eaten its fill of brains, that human-headed spider monster crawled up and down the corpse, letting out a mournful scream like an infant's wail. Just then, an arrow of light made of pure spiritual energy flew through the night and pierced its still howling mouth, skewering a hole clean through it. Amidst the sudden silence and everyone's dazed stares, Shin Qingqiu rubbed his sore eyes. His sore ears slowly shook out his sleeves, and with a snap of his fan murmured, "Shut up." This arrival of his was truly quite low-key. Oh my God! What was that? Whoa! The donghua lets you believe that those spiders are just creepy, but that is absolutely horrifying. Although, maybe my favorite Shin Qingqiu entrance so far. Oh my gosh! Well, we're here. We still have 2 chapters to go, and we're already caught up. Oh, we're getting to No Man's Land today. Oh, no big deal. It's fine. Chapter 25, Shizoon! At the sight of Shin Qingqiu, Lo Binghe was far happier than shocked. After all, since the mayhem began, he anticipated that Shin Qingqiu would absolutely be worried that he would personally enter the gorge to rescue them. Shin Qingqiu swiftly righted himself. He swept his gaze over the many disciples coming to surround him and asked, "Is anyone injured?" "Other than those Shime at the riverside, and the Shidi who just died now, we've thus suffered no other casualties," said Lo Binghe. "You've been through a lot," said Shin Qingqiu. Lo Binghe smiled. his eyes brightly shining. This disciple was only doing his duty. It's like they're having a moment! Shin Qingqiu glanced at Chen Wanyu, whose eyes were still red. You can still smile? Smile? Don't you know that one of your wives is dead? Now that a powerful senior had appeared to rescue them, every one of the disciples acted like they'd seen their mother, stopping short of just clinging to Shin Qingqiu's thighs and wailing. There's a lot of thigh clinging in this novel, isn't there? There's no need to panic, nor reason to fear, said Shin Qingqiu. The sect leaders know the situation within the barrier, and a large number of seniors have already entered the gorge to help. Protect yourselves well. We'll be able to break out soon. His words were like a narcotic. The youths who'd been frightened out of their wits absorbed them and became at ease. Shizun, what exactly was that thing? Asked Lo Binghe. When it came to proud immortal demon ways, demonic beasts, he'd really asked the right person. Shin Qingqiu spoke with great familiarity, like he was listing his family treasures. Oh, it's no surprise you've never seen one. That was a ghost head spider. Mean-tempered and terrifying to behold, it can mimic the sound of crying infants and uses that to lure prey. Once the prey approaches, it uses the suction pads below its head to firmly grip the top of the prey's skull. Its 8 legs are incredibly sharp and can pierce right through bone, allowing it to draw the brains out of living creatures. As Lo Binghe listened to this excruciatingly detailed explanation, he was filled with both admiration and awe. To think that such an evil creature exists in this world. This disciple is truly too ignorant. Ever since Lo Binghe apprenticed under Mang Mo, Shin Qingqiu had been able to provide him with less and less guidance on martial and sword techniques. This rare chance to show off as a master before his disciple secretly left Shin Qingqiu feeling an immense sense of satisfaction. It was like he'd finally found his long-lost teacher's halo. Yeah, exactly, right? Oh, ghost head spiders are a demonic rarity, he went on. Being unsuited to the human realm's environment, it's been many years since any sightings of them, so naturally they don't appear in most reference guides. Next time you see one, remember to directly strike its temples. The one we just saw was a male, and that's fortunate. The female ones are even more terrifying. They hadn't yet said much to each other when more rustling came from the leaves overhead. One by one, heads suspended upside down from threads of white silk descended from the trees. Oh, again, a little different. Shin Qingqiu's expression completely changed. Ghost head spiders, their cries attracted large numbers, allowing them to encircle and attack their prey. He swept his fan, releasing a powerful gust of wind and snapping dozens of silk threads. The ghost head spiders smashed into the ground and thudded like overripe fruit. Go, said Shin Qingqiu. Lo Binghe sprung into action. While the ghost head spiders were dazed and reeling, the entire group broke out into a run. Master and disciple, one in the lead carving a path, the other bringing up the rear, together sandwiched the bloated procession. The two ends slaughtered foes until it rained blood, the air thick with the stench of carnage. Ghost head spiders were agile and possessed incredible jumping ability. But as they flew and leapt through the air, the barrage of spiritual blasts fired by master and disciple punctured them like sieves. Once Lo Binghe knew how to deal with these beasts, it was like he'd been blessed by divinity. The main character. He could practically pierce 2 or more in a single blow with his eyes closed. The scene overhead was a mess of blood and gore, anguished wails, and monstrous howls. Even with all they accomplished, in the end there were still too many, and they proved impossible to defend against. Just as Shin Qingqiu started to worry about when that goddamn heck of poison would act up, he felt his spiritual power stagnate, and his next strike came up empty. Well, truly speak of the devil! Shin Qingqiu swiftly redirected the flow of his energy into a physical attack. With a flip of his hand, his fan sliced through the ghost head spider, lunging towards him horizontally in 2. Lo Binghe had been paying keen attention to Shin Qingqiu's condition. He knew something was off, and he asked Shizun. It's nothing, Shin Qingqiu rushed to say. Focus on yourself. Fortunately, under Shin Qingqiu's leadership, they'd already reached a particular area. As if the ghost head spiders had encountered an invisible barrier, they didn't dare advance and instead wailed and howled while falling back, until they at last withdrew into the shrubberies and trees and vanished. Oh, well, so that's it. Okay, all right. Shin Qingqiu let out a sigh of relief. Delicately panting, her expression uncertain, Chen Wanyu asked, Senior Shin, why were those demonic beasts unwilling to approach this place? Have you forgotten what kind of mystical flower grows in Judy Gorge? Asked Shin Ching-cho. In truth, the one who'd forgotten was him. Forgive me for not remembering the flower's name. Lo Binghe very considerately remembered for him, speaking the name right away. Oh, Thousand Leaves Fresh Snow Lotus. Shin Ching-cho finally realized why he'd been unable to remember the name. The number of mystical flowers named something snow whatever or this and that lotus was such that they were more numerous than old memes. Like hell anyone could remember. Correct, said Shin Ching-cho. This is indeed the Thousand Leaves Fresh Snow Lotus. This flower has grown within the depths of Judy Gorge for thousands of years. Its spiritual chi is extraordinary, and furthermore, it is the natural bane of creatures from the demon realm. It emits an innate barrier that repels demonic beasts. Therefore, as long as we're within its protected zone, we won't suffer too many attacks. The natural bane of demonic creatures? Lo Binghe suddenly asked. He'd been listening with rapt attention the entire time, and now intense sparks seemed to ignite within his gaze, which flickered faintly with a peculiar quality. Shin Ching-cho thought it was strange. Yes? Then, Shizun, could this spray of Thousand Leaves Fresh Snow Lotus cure demonic poison? Lo Binghe asked. Shin Ching-cho was horrified. That look. Lo Binghe couldn't be hoping to pick the mystical flower and cure him, right? Stop! Do not pass go! The girl you're supposed to pick the flower for, Chin Wanyu, is right next to us watching, and you wanted to flower it in her presence? And for a big, strong man to boot? Leave your wife some dignity, all right? We should handle the crisis before us first, Shin Ching-cho said quickly. But Lo Binghe wouldn't let it go. This disciple asks for Shizun's instruction. It cannot do what you imply, said Shin Ching-cho. Well, has Shizun tried it before? Lo Binghe pushed. If we don't try, how can we know? This disciple knows that Shizun doesn't want him to take chances, but if we don't take this one, the disciple will never be at peace. Well, this isn't really the time. Why must you be so filial at this crucial juncture? At this critical juncture, I can't tell you that the only way to completely cure the poison is to take a trip to Pound Town with you, okay? Shin Ching-cho couldn't say any of this in such terms. His expression became cold. Has this master indulged you such that you think you can willfully fool around even at a time like this? To tell the truth, over the past few years, due to Shin Ching-cho's strange desire to preemptively atone along with other certain sentiments, he'd never spoken to his disciple with even the slightest bit of harshness. So once he did, Lo Binghe first startled. Then, as expected, he obediently shut his mouth. But his gaze remained obstinate, and he refused to sheath Zhang Yang, obviously unwilling to back down. Just as the two reached a deadlock, the dense overgrowth of grass and leaves rustled, and a person stepped out. Behind him came a group of battered and exhausted disciples who had no doubt endured a bloody struggle. I can't wait to talk about all this, by the way. On guard, Shin Ching-cho looked his way. As soon as he came face to face with the newcomer, he felt like a giant hammer from the sky had smashed into his temples. In truth, this person's appearance couldn't have been considered proper and handsome. Could have been considered proper and handsome. It was just that in his every word and action, there was an inescapable air of sleaziness. At the sight of Shin Ching-cho, he smiled and returned his sword, flowing with light back to its sheath. So it was Shin Shizhong, he said. Meeting up with you puts my heart at ease. At ease? At ease my ass. With you here, I can't be at ease, okay? The person in front of him was the main culprit behind this catastrophe. Oh! Shang Qinghua, a character that Shin Ching-cho had mentally roasted before with, he goes with Tsinghua University. Well, I even took Beijing University's exam. Was the Peak Lord of Onding Peak. At the same time, he had another important identity. He was a spy, a pawn planted many years ago by the demons, and he had orchestrated the disaster at the Immortal Alliance Conference. So the word Shang can mean to go to in the sense of going to a university. So the name Shang Qinghua read aloud sounds like goes to Tsinghua University. Tsinghua or Tsinghua University and Beijing University are the two top schools sometimes referred to as the MIT and Harvard of China. Oh, Long ago, Shang Qinghua had been only one of Anding Peak's many insignificant and nameless disciples. Then he'd be captured by demons who had forced him to become a mole. No, he hadn't really been forced. He happily took on the important task of being a mole without even a hint of discomfort. Secretly backed by the demons, Shang Qinghua's road became smooth sailing. He swiftly rose through the ranks until he actually attained the position of Peak Lord of Anding Peak. However, he still wasn't satisfied. And why not? Because it was Anding Peak. As soon as you heard the name stable and settled, you knew it wasn't a place for the ambitious. This peak's tradition and specialty was completely in line with its name, logistics. So of course the entire peak from top to bottom, including the Peak Lord, were like bricks, to be moved wherever they were needed. Send some cheap laborers here today, assist with supplies there tomorrow. Mountain gate's broken, get an Anding Peak to fix it. Missing a carriage driver, get Anding Peak to send someone. This month's expenses over budget, you need money, get Anding Peak to file a report. Even if this kind of Peak Lord's professional competence was trounced that of Langjiang and New Oriental, could they be called impressive? Were they imposing? Were they cool, awesome, insane, badass, or hyped? Did they have the dignity of a Peak Lord? Apparently, this refers to the Shandong Lanjiang Vocational School and New Oriental Education and Technology Group Incorporated. They are well known because of their ads, so this is a derogatory reference. Okay, she's making fun of them. Even a talented low-level disciple from another peak would have had more to brag about. So, Shang Qinghua became a demon flunky without hesitation. He took it upon himself to help the demons conquer the human realm and committed all kinds of evil. Shin Qingshou's stomach hurt as soon as he saw the guy. "Shang Shady," he said. "As you approached, did you see a large demonic beast nearby?" Shang Qinghua froze. A large demonic beast? There wasn't one. Shin Qingshou's heart thumped. There wasn't? The large demonic beast in question was one of the plotline's key devices. In the original work, Lo Binghei's demonic heritage was exposed because someone released a Black Moon Rhinoceros python at the Immortal Alliance conference. To protect the innocent, Lo Binghei engaged it in a life or death struggle. The Black Moon Rhinoceros python's destructive power and body were both enormous. Of course he couldn't defeat it. What to do if he couldn't win? Activate Seed Mode. In doing Seed Mode, a reference to an ability in the series Mobile Suit Gundam Seed that allows someone to enter an enhanced state. Well, thank you, MXTX, for spoiling Gundam! No, joking. I'm not surprised by that. So many references. In doing so, Lo Binghei exposed himself to Shin Qingshou. Only then did Shin Qingshou have the excuse to strike him down, eliminating one's companion for the sake of justice. And when he struck his student down, he enabled Lo Binghei to level up. Thus far, Shin Qingshou hadn't sensed the demonic chi of the Black Moon Rhinoceros python, much less heard its signature moonward howl, described in an enigmatic fashion as like that of both a python and a rhinoceros. Now Shang Qinghua said he hadn't seen it. Shin Qingshou couldn't help being on his guard. Without this key plot device, surely the system couldn't ask him to suddenly strike Lo Binghei without any justification. He couldn't help but glance at the silent, unspeaking Lo Binghei. The child was still struggling with the matter of whether he should pick the flower to cure his master's poison. There was a stubborn glint in his eyes, as if he felt a little discontent. Discontent my ass. Come on, I'm doing this for your own good. If you're going to pick flowers, don't give them to the wrong person, thank you. On the way here, we lost quite a few disciples from various sects, said Shang Qinghua, a tone full of grief and lamentation. They were all future pillars of the cultivation world. The person who released these demonic creatures is truly poisonous and shameless, underhanded and vulgar, cruel to the point of insanity. Shin Qingshou was speechless. Weren't you the one who released those creatures? Are you really okay with saying those lines to attack yourself? Although if you don't mind, that's fine. He hadn't finished his mental roast when, without warning, the earth began to shake. People staggered and fell over all over the place, terrified and confused, their questioning voices merging into one. Shin Qingshou's pupils contracted. There was no mistaking the sensation of a magnitude 7.5 earthquake. The endless abyss had finally been opened. all different, and this is all new, and we still have one chapter to go. Oh, no. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Okay. The so-called Endless Abyss was on the boundary between the human and demon realms, a liminal space. It was full of peril and the unknown. Twisting and tearing vortices through space, raging flames, and burning magma were everywhere to be found. The disciples on the scene had fought the entire way there, and their bodies and hearts had long been completely exhausted. After that violent quake, most of them tumbled to the ground. Only Shin Qingqiu, Lo Binghe, and Shang Qinghua managed to stay standing. Since the Endless Abyss had been opened, that meant something demonic would definitely appear from the other side. The three held their breaths in anticipation, silently waiting and on full alert. The figure of a man slowly emerged from the shadows. As soon as Shin Qingqiu saw that ice-cold face and aloof expression, he knew who it was. He shot a glance at Shang Qinghua, whose whole face had gone white. Shin Qingqiu wanted to laugh, but he was unable to. Why would Lo Binghe's future subordinate, his magnificent right hand, and best buddy for committing evil deeds, murder, and mayhem, show up right here and right now? What? Mobe Jun was a pure-blooded demon, a supremely orthodox demonic second gen. In the future, he would inherit his family's territory on the demonic border in the north, and after that, he would spend all his time appearing and disappearing at will, idling his life away, completely indifferent to everyone else. However, this maverick was destined to get beaten up by a Lo Binghe who had suddenly activated his overpowered abilities. Thereafter, he would mysteriously capitulate to the protagonist, to the point of letting himself be ordered about. From then on, Lo Binghe would have an exceptionally badass-looking errand boy and loyal sidekick. But to be clear, according to the original timeline, there are still 500 chapters before it's your turn to debut, Great Master. Oh my god! Oh, we're just skipping 500 chapters? 500 chapters? What? Oh! Who is this distinguished one? Shang Qinghua yelled as he rushed forward. Why have you come to this place? Isn't that your real boss? Wasn't he the one who ordered you to release those dangerous creatures in the Judy Gorge? No, please go right ahead and keep pretending. Mobe Jun tilted his head. Half of his handsome silhouette sank into the darkness, a chilling sight. With a half-hearted flick of his finger, he flung Shang Qinghua into the air with sudden force. Shang Qinghua crashed into an old tree and fainted, blood spurting unceasingly from his mouth, spurting until Shin Qingqiu couldn't help but sigh with respect. Such effort. Such dedication. Bro, you sure do a lot for your career. After paying his respects, he sighed again. He'd known it would go this way. In the end, he would still need to step in. Holding his sword before him, Shin Qingqiu spoke, neither humble nor haughty. A demon? This line was pointless bullshit. Anyone who couldn't see those murky billows of demonic chi would have been blind. A white figure flashed past him. Without saying a word, Lo Binghe had moved to stand in front of his teacher. Oh, because he's still, like, he's not been, his spiritual energy is still trapped, right? Right? They just argued, and now they faced a powerful enemy, yet he still played the role of a human shield without hesitation. It would have been a lie to say Shin Qingqiu was entirely unmoved. But the more moved he was, the more he felt that what he was about to do was just too cruel. Shin Qingqiu wished that his student had done nothing at all. Binghe, stand down, he said. Lo Binghe did not reply, and he did not leave. He calmly met eyes with Mobe Jun, entirely unaffected by his imposing aura. Mobe Jun let out an eh of curiosity, like he'd found something that aroused his interest a little bit. What disciple has to shield its master? Snapped Shin Qingqiu. You are a disciple of Sangzhong Mountain? Asked Mobe Jun. Disciple of Zhang Mountain's Jiding Peak. Lo Binghe thanks this distinguished one for his guidance. Lo Binghe replied coldly, his tone sarcastic. Mobe Jun sneered. The immortal acts unlike an immortal, and the demon acts unlike a demon. Interesting. At this, Shin Qingqiu finally had caught on to something. Could it be that Mobe Jun's appearance was a substitute for the Black Moon Rhinoceros Python's role in advancing the main storyline? Immortal probably referred to Shang Qinghua, who was lying off to the side and playing dead, while occasionally remembering to cough up blood. Though clearly a cultivator, he tirelessly labored for the demon realm, indeed completely unlike an immortal. That was a fair accusation. As for the demon, who on the scene could this refer to other than Lo Binghe? Shin Qingshou's thoughts turned and whirled. He wasn't sure if Mo Beijun could really see Lo Binghe's hidden bloodline with a single glance. Lo Binghe saw his master's furrowed brow and feared he was angry at his own disobedience. Shizun, he won't let any of us go. It'd be better to use all of our strength and fight this battle together. That's true, but it'd also be fucking useless. But Shin Qingshou said, if you stay here, you'll lose your life in vain. Dying for Shizun or dying together with Shizun, either one is something this disciple would gladly do, said Lo Binghe. Mo Beiji scoffed. You'd do battle with me? The following such foolish arrogance was politely left unspoken. Good thing you didn't say it out loud, thought Shin Qingshou. In 3 years, Lo Binghe will be able to single-handedly beat you until you can't get up. And won't you still become his diligent henchman? You'd really be slapping your own face. Fine, said Mo Beijun, then let me see. Before he finished speaking, the killing intent in the air around them had spiked. His steps agile and unreadable, Shin Qingshou flashed in front of Lo Binghe. With his left hand, he tossed Zhu Ya to hold off Mo Beijun for a bit, even if it would be largely ineffective. At the same time, with his right hand, he lifted Lo Binghe like an eagle would a chick and hurled him away. Once he'd sent Lo Binghe outside the range of Mo Beijun's demonic chi, he turned and met palms with Mo Beijun. When their palms connected, blood churned in Shin Qingshou's chest, as if someone had punched him there. The spiritual energy in his body surged like it was boiling over, though he'd already formed a core and his cultivation wasn't low. What was a golden core against the right hand of a future demon lord, Lo Binghe? But he had to go all out and try. Throwing himself into a desperate battle to the death without regard for his own life was the only way to survive this. According to Shin Qingshou's experience from the 10-plus years of reading all sorts of wuxia and zhansha novels, temperamental Chunis had a modicum of respect for hard-headed types who fought bloody battles to the end and refused to admit defeat. But they definitely didn't show any mercy to cowards and weaklings. So Chunis is the shortened form of Japanese chunibyo, or middle school second-year disease. It describes people who are edgy or have delusions of grandeur, used as a loan word in the Chinese text. Oh, okay. All right. I think there's an anime series named after that. Interesting. Throwing himself into it. Yeah, but he had to go all out and try. Having been caught off guard and hurled away by Shin Qingshou, Lo Binghe doubled back, unsheathing Zhang Yang. Mo Beijun had spared one hand to flick away the white sword glare he threw. Zhang Yang couldn't withstand the massive influx of demonic energy, and in an explosion of white light, it shattered into pieces on the spot. Mo Beijun held off both of Shin Qingshou's hands with just one of his own. His power overwhelmingly superior. Bored, he blasted Shin Qingshou away. Unusually inferior talent, he said. Foundation and techniques inflexible. Leave. Shin Qingshou said nothing. He wasn't some unmatched genius in the human realm, but his talent was still at least in a 1 in 1,000. And Sangzhong Mountain's foundation and techniques weren't inflexible, they were orthodox. Mo Beijun still described them as he would a pile of garbage. If the original Shin Qingshou had heard this, he would have coughed up 3 liters of blood and ran away crying to make a voodoo doll. Lo Binghe didn't care that his sword was broken. When he saw Shin Qingshou injured by this palm strike, blood dripping between gritted teeth, Lo Binghe's gaze frosted over, his aura changing in an instant. Sensing this shocking change, a cold flash of interest shot through Mo Beijun's pale blue eyes. He abruptly summoned a pure black sword of ice out of thin air. That one blade became 2, 2 became 4, 4 became 8, instantly dividing into an array of hundreds of ice swords, which shot at the surrounded Shin Qingshou from all directions. Oh no! No normal defense technique could possibly block those ice swords. They were crystallized from the purest demonic chi. Shin Qingshou's spiritual chi was nearly exhausted. If his power collided with Mo Beijun's, it would be like a single spark against a towering wave. The end result went without saying. Just as the sword array was about to come down like sheets of rain, Shin Qingqiu snarled within his heart. I've done my best, but he still thinks I'm low-level trash, so what can I do? How loathsome. If I have to die, couldn't it at least be in a better-looking way? After being stabbed with hundreds of black swords, I'm going to be a sieve. Who could bear to look? However, even long moments after, the pain of being skewered by thousands of swords did not arrive. Unless Mo Bei-jun suddenly lost his mind and revoked the sword array, there was only one explanation. Only one person could have blocked this attack that seethed with murderous intent. Shin Qingqiu steadied himself and slowly raised his head. As expected. In the air all around him, the forest of swords had shattered. They'd splintered so completely that it was like they disappeared without a trace, leaving only a night sky full of black ice crystals. Reflecting the moonlight, they fell one by one. This scene could have been described as beautiful. However, Lo Binghe, standing in the middle of it, was the center of a blizzard that seemed to roar around him, and within his gaze, he could only be described as terrifying. Shin Qingqiu collapsed next to a large tree, swallowing mouthfuls of blood. He circulated energy to try and heal his wounds while watching this earth-shaking showdown between the two demon lords. The seal on Lo Binghe's blood had yet to be removed. Mo Bei-jun was only testing him, but still this battle darkened the sky and the earth, blotting out all the light. Raging waves of demonic energy overflowed from both of them, enough to cloak the entire sky. Wasn't this area within range of the Thousand Leaves Fresh Snow Lotus? That's what it was called, right? Right. Demonic creatures were supposed to be afraid to approach its proximity. But as soon as this inescapable smog of demonic chi touched the flower, the snow lotus that brimmed with spiritual chi wilted and rotted down to its roots. All the demonic creatures hiding in the dark crept out one by one, greedily inhaling what to them was a fragrant scent. Oh no! Several ghost-headed spiders stealthily crawled out onto a few of the Sangzhong Mountain disciples, hairy legs poised to stab into their temples. Shin Qingqiu was nearly out of spiritual energy and was unable to use attack spells. He could only directly grab the beast by their filthy tangled hair and throw them aside. He aimed before he threw, making sure to toss them towards that traitor Shang Qinghua. Meanwhile, Mo Bei-jun had pretty much finished testing Lo Binghe, and he prepared to wrap things up, sending out one last blow. With a flick of his finger, he fired a stream of scarlet light at the center of Lo Bing's forehead. Once that stream of light touched Lo Binghe's brow, it seeped into his skin, turning into a fiery red mark. Lo Binghe was lost to his bloodlust. He didn't know why, only that his head ached like it was about to explode, and he nearly collapsed to his knees. His entire body roiled with a desire to inflict savage cruelty. Unable to vent it, he threw out his hand, and, as if shot out of a cannon, an eruption of demonic chi descended upon Mo Bei-jun. The last strike was extremely powerful. Yet Mo Bei-jun waved it away with one hand, a bit surprised. Oh, not bad. Ignoring whether Lo Binghe was in a state to understand him, he continued, The human realm isn't where you belong. Why not return to your origins? Now, Shin Qingqiu was finally 100% sure. Mo Bei-jun's sudden appearance was indeed a substitute for the Black Moon Rhinoceros Python. But compared to the original, Mo Bei-jun had done a far more thorough job. He'd actually directly removed the seal, suppressing Lo Binghe's demonic blood. Oh my god! What? What is happening? What? Oh my god. Okay. Well, it's okay. We don't need to panic. We're just now in uncharted territory. Everything's fine. We're here. Hey, do you remember Mo Bei-jun? Do you remember him? Do you remember Shang Qinghua? Remember him? No, because we hadn't gotten to them in the donghua. What? What, Mo
'Mo 北 June, what?
北 June, what? 北 June, what? 北 June, what? 北 June, what? 北 June, what? 北 June, what? 北 June, what? 北 June, what? 北 June, what? 北 June, what? 北 June, what? 北 June, what? 北 June, what? 北 June, what? 北 June, what? 北 June, what? 北 June, what? 北 June, what? 北 June, what? 北 June, what? 北 June, what? 北 June, what? 北 June, what? 北 June, what? 北 June, what? 北 June, what? 北 June, what? 北 June, what? 北 June, what? 北 June, what? 北 June, what? 北 June, what? 北 June, what? 北 June, what? 北 June, what? 北 June, what? 北 June, what? 北 June, what? 北 June, what? 北 June, this story officially just went off the rails, and we're not even through volume 1. And we're already making some pretty dangerous changes. Not dangerous necessarily. Well, they are dangerous, but like some drastic changes. And I'm like, oh, what are we going to do? So it's like MXTX is like, okay, you think you know what's going to happen. You think you have an idea of how I'm going to change the story up. Well, what if I introduce a character 500 chapters early? And I'm like, what? So yeah. We need to talk about this a hot second. Before we get into this, though, I can't remember if I talked about the chapter titles last week. So I went to Reiki, post them on the Discord. So I went to them. Chapter 20 last week was Difficult Mission. Chapters 21 and 22 were the Immortal Alliance Conference, aptly named. Chapter 23 and 24 were called Sudden Surprise, Part 1 and Part 2. Aptly named. And then this chapter 25 and 26 were called Endless Abyss Part 1 and Part 2. And then next week we're gonna have 27, 28, 29, and 30. Oh my god. Ha! So yeah. I'm pretty excited about next week already, because we're gonna be getting into we're in uncharted waters now. Now! I kind of wondered, I was like, I thought we were at least going to catch up this week with the donghua, and I was like, okay, we're gonna catch up. We might just dive a little bit further, but by diving further, Romania Black was thinking like, oh, we'll escape from the headless spiders, which we're gonna talk about. We're gonna escape from the headless spiders, and we're gonna, maybe regroup and talk about it, and Shin Qingqiu's probably gonna be like all upset because, Wan Rong's gone, but no, we moved on, and there's a lot of donghua only stuff that was in, because now we're past that. So here's the thing. I don't know. I'm not exactly sure if some of this stuff was, we're going to talk about the donghua only versus novel and donghua here in a hot second. My only fear is that if there was something in the donghua that's going to be shown later on in the book, I don't want to know about it, because obviously I'm going to read the book and find out. But, oh, okay. Well, that's something. So yeah. All right. Well, let's talk about these chapters, and Whiteboard Coon's going to help us out. So here's the thing. We have what was basically in the donghua as Wan Yu and Wan Rong were basically trying to follow Lo Binghe. And Lo Binghe, he's an underdog himself, so he's a magnet for underdogs in this situation. He's become kind of like the king of the underdogs at this moment. And his thing is, Shin knows that, as according to the story, Shin knows that Lo is going to have his second win, and he's going to start to defeat all the things. Here's the thing that's so weird, right? Because let's break this down, right? Let's start breaking this down, because things start getting confusing. Not necessarily confusing, but things get complicated at this point in the story. So let's just dive in the OG, right? In the OG, we have the idea that Lo Binghe he basically gets to the point where he gets to take the lead when he has his second wind. And it's like, okay, cool. Have that happen. That's really great. Nicely going. All right. He gets his second wind, takes the lead. Well, now we're in the new story. When was that supposed to happen? Because as far as we know, I guess at this point in the story, what ends up happening is he's down behind. He does the little lake scene, which we'll talk about here in a second. He does the lake scene with, what is her name? It is, oh gosh, her name there. Oh, I gotta think of her name for a second. It's not on here. We're gonna get back to that. But anyway, so he starts out where he's behind, but then he takes the lead and gets his second win. My thing was, when exactly does he get his second win? Because it seems like as soon as he would get his second win, that's when the moon rhinoceros shows up. So we're gonna go back through this. This is gonna get a little bit more complicated, but I want to dive in a little bit. But Shin thinks that he's gonna take the lead again, so he's not worried. He's like, no, it's fine. He's like, you guys don't even know what's coming. And I love in that moment that Shin kind of has, in the back of his mind, this little moment where he's like, am I, rooting for him? What's happening? But he doesn't think much of it, right? Meanwhile, we, the audience, know that Lo Binghae is like sitting there trying to be like, I need to impress Shizun. How do I impress Shizun? And Shin Chingcho has no clue that's going on. So it's just like, But in other words, we have the observers. I like that Chi Ching-chi, her and Liu Chingay are kind of like the ones that are like looking at Shin Chingcho like, dude, you clearly have some favoritism for Lo Binghae, but okay. I like that both of them are the skeptical ones, right? Also, the donghua, I guess we should go ahead and put like donghua only over here. But the donghua, maybe it was just me, but the Huanhua Palace seems a lot more suspicious in the donghua. I don't know. The girl that's the palace master's daughter, she's not even really mentioned in the novel. She's not even brought up, but she seemed like she was going to be a harem member in the donghua, so that's interesting. The daughter's not really mentioned at all. And here's my thing. I don't know. I don't want to know exactly if it's donghua only, if the character is, because there's a strong possibility that that daughter is going to show up later in the novel, and the donghua, the people that were creating it, had already read the novel and just felt like going ahead and putting her in there, kind of like an Easter egg, so that if you read the novel, you know she's coming, and you're like, oh, they're showing her early, okay. So I don't necessarily want to know if she's donghua only or not. I don't want to know that. I just find it interesting that some of this stuff either doesn't appear in the novel, or maybe it appears later and it's just out of sequence at this point, right? But that's interesting. Also, the idea of the Alliance members finding Lo Binghae, his actions to be childish, and the idea that he's not only too trusting, but he's too naive, I feel like is going to be something that Shin Chingcho is going to bring up and be like, hey, this is why I've got to do it, because, you know, here's a lesson to learn, and then it just like pushes him off into the abyss, right? I assume he pushes him off. I feel like, to me, I feel like he's going to get him to the edge of the abyss. And in my mind, I feel like it's kind of, I guess I'm going to wave my hand, and these are Mode Azushi spoilers. So if you've not watched Mode Azushi, just wait until I wave my hand again, and that means I'll be done talking. But for me, in my mind, when I think of the abyss moment, Shin Chingcho has to push him off of the abyss. And the opening showed Lo Binghae like falling, kind of like Wei Wuxian. In my mind, I feel like Shin Chingcho like has him at knife point and kicks him off into the abyss, and that's where it happens. Now, whether or not that ends up happening, or if Lo Binghae falls, it's like a Scar moment from Lion King where Shin Chingcho lets him go, I don't know, but we'll see how that abyss moment goes and if it mirrors anything from Mode Azushi or not. So I don't know. We'll just have to wait and see. I feel like if it is a direct reference, then probably Mode Azushi readers were forgiving, because they both happened fairly early. Anyway, so Lo Binghae, you know, we find out the old palace master sees in Lo Binghae his mother, and that's why he sees, like, has some favoritism towards him, and it's like, okay. And so, in any case, we have Qin Wanyu, yes. She's the first maiden to sleep with Lo Binghae, the graceful and subdued little Shimei. Yes. So, meanwhile, as Lo's like mulling over how to get himself out of the situation, Shin Chingcho thinks he's rolling around with maidens and making sparks fly. So it's just like, oh my god. So Shin Chingcho, in the original novel, we have the lake scene with Qin Wanyu and Qin Wanrong, and Lo like falling in love with them. And then basically they're both alive. Somehow in the OG novel, Qin Wanyu gets poisoned. We don't exactly know how that happens, because in this novel version they don't get around any poison for that to happen, so it's just in the OG novel. And that's when we have the flower scene where he uses it to have sex with Qin Wanyu, and that's part of the story, to cure her. And then somehow, after all that happens, I'm assuming that's when afterwards that second wind moment comes in, before the moon rhino python, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. So yeah, all this junk is supposed to be going on, And Shin Chingcho thinks it's going to happen. And then the moon rhino python, we'll get to that scene later. But here, it's like, no, that's not happening. Things aren't going down exactly the same way before, right? So then we come to this next juncture with the lake scene. Honestly, it's kind of hilarious because Shin Chingcho, he believes that at one point while Chin Wanyu is like watching Bing He against the tree contemplating what to do, he thinks that she's falling in love. He's like, oh, surely she'd be falling in love with him right now. No, he's describing himself falling in love with Lo Bing He. He's describing what he feels like. Not her. She has like no chemistry with him. She feels like she wants to kind of like, you know, be like him and help, you know, help the others and get up in the ranks herself. But at no point in this set of chapters does she show that she's trying to flirt with him. And so that's why in the donghua, it seems that that whole moment with her, with the big hug and everything and him saving her, was like the donghua only, showing how like that was how it was in the OG novel, but they don't have any chemistry anymore. And it's like, yeah, she doesn't, like, even when they're up against Mo Baijun later, she's like not even there. She's immediately not involved in the story anymore. And she doesn't even help Shin Chingcho get off away from the spider heads at all. So it's so interesting to me that we're starting to see just how complexly things are not going according to plan. And Shin Chingcho, I feel like, is starting to realize, oh, this isn't going to go down the way I think it is. But he's still so damn oblivious. He's so damn oblivious about Lo Bing He liking him. And I'm like, ah! So anyway, we're just gonna get down there. So Lo Bing He is supposed to lose his virginity to her. He has no chemistry with her now. She's supposed to be like, and basically it's cutting out, we're cutting out all of the harem intrigue. Because guess who's taking their place? Shin Chingcho. So we're not going to have all these squabbles between the harem because it's not even going to be a thing anymore. It's like, oh my God. So yeah, I do think that one of the lessons that Lo Bing He is going to have to learn is about people taking advantage of his kindness and what he's going to do from there. But I was really surprised that the Wan Rong scene was not as, it was definitely made more cinematic in the donghua, like with her leaning against the cliff and the creature. And then in the donghua, it wasn't something that looked like the Ring. It was like a legit monster. And here it's just like a monster that looks like Ringu. And it's like, what? Like, I'm assuming they couldn't do that because of copyright. So it all makes sense. And in this set of chapters, there were a lot of references. There was references to TV shows, to movies, to pop culture figures, which makes sense because Shen Yan would be able to understand those references coming from the real world. But it's still so interesting to me how the donghua tried to like skirt around it. I'm not mad at it. It's just fascinating to me that they were like, we can't show the girl from the Ring. So they just try to like find a way around it, right? Which is so interesting to me. So yeah, but I also love that Shin Chingcho is like berating these girls because they're not interested in wearing proper footwear. He's like, if you girls would wear proper footwear, we wouldn't have these problems. Like what is even happening? So I do love that he shows like some favoritism towards Liu Mingyan. He loves her because she's just this really cool badass that's not too interested in Lo Bing He, which is really fun. But he's like, in the future when you're gathering your harem, don't just put more thought into the quality. Don't just get any decent looking girl. Have some standards, which I think is also going to have a play in this because we talk about the standards in the harem. And the difference between the OG and the new story is that instead of Lo Bing He just letting any old girl into his harem, in the new story, he's going to let none into his harem, and it'll just be Shin Chingcho. And I'm like, oh my God. And Shin has no clue. Has no idea. So anyway, Shin gets tense because he thinks this moment is coming. And Shin also is just kind of like, you know, why is Lo not going out towards the lake? There's like this fan servicey scene where Lo's like bathing with all the women and it's all this, and Lo's not doing that. And because Lo wasn't doing that, he couldn't grab Wanrong and save her in time so she ends up getting killed. And at this point, like in the donghua, Shin realizes, oh, Hera members can die. Huh. I don't know if he's put together 2 and 2 that only Lo is guaranteed to live. Everyone else in the story can die. It's just Lo Binghe, which is a terrifying realization, because if Lo is the only one that can live, theoretically, that throws everything up for grabs. And I don't know if Shin Qingqiu's fully realized that yet. It seems like he's like, He also is like, you'll miss the plot if this doesn't happen. So this story is going to get a lot more complicated, because Shin is going to have to try to figure out, okay, what order are we keeping with now? What's the system going to do? Can these events, do they have to happen unless the system says they have to happen? Do they not have to happen? What's going to go down with this? So yeah, it's going to be interesting. So yeah. And then that's when the creature comes out and attacks the new Yan Chan, and we have the end of chapter 24. Insane. So, or the end of chapter 23. So chapter 24 happens, and they all manage to get away, and that's when they all realize that something is throwing all of their disciples in danger, because these monsters that have been here should not have been there. And at this point, we also had, from the donghua, we actually, like, Liu Mingyan and Gong Yi, their adventures are not to be seen in the novel at all. We don't see them. So I'm like, did they actually happen, or are they donghua only? Or is the novel going to show them later on? Also, we have suspicions about the culprit, but we find out in the novel who the culprit actually is, which is like, what the fudge? So, I guess over here, we'll place that we have new characters. I would put Qin Wanyu on here, because she is technically a new character. She's kind of like just standing there by the end of it. We don't know what she's doing, or she's disappeared or whatnot. And it was just between Shin and Lo. What's interesting is she kind of just disappears by the end of these chapters, and she's not important anymore. She's just relegated to the side. And Shin Qingqiu and Lo Binghe, during their argument, it's like just between the two of them. And it's like, oh. So then we also have Shang Chin. We'll wait for his name, because there's too many Chins and Chings in this story. There's so many Ching Chis, Chin Yan Yus. There's so many Zhaos and Yans and Chins. There's so many. It's like keeping them all on track. And then that's why I was like, Mobe June. I was like, that's a different name. I like that one. That one's easy to remember because it's different than all the others. It's like, yay. And they're just like, Mobe June's so interesting. We'll get to him in a minute. But yeah. So they figure out that something is attacking all their disciples. And here's the thing too, right? So in the OG version, we're going to like put out here, I'm going to put down here, in the OG version, Shin Qingqiu was probably not concerned about getting involved in the battle. Maybe he ended up getting involved in the battle, but in the original one, he wasn't trying to save Lo Binghe at all. And he was a scum villain, so he didn't have a lot of integrity. So here, also, we had a certain number of, we're going to put plus 30 B points up here. I'm going to keep track. I'm going to look up in the video from last week. I don't know if it was 1,150 or what it was. I'll add 30 to it. But we had 30 B points added because Shin Qingqiu made this emboldened speech to go. Because, and the thing about it is, with Shin Qingqiu making the speech to go join them and save the disciples, part of it was because he knows that the plot is dependent upon him being there. But the other part of it is that he genuinely does want to help. And so that's kind of, you know, it is some genuine B points that he earned there in that moment. Now, I like that Liu Qingge says, you know, you can't go because otherwise your spiritual powers might be blocked, and then what? What's interesting is they do get blocked when they're fighting the spider heads, but then he's able to fight back somewhat against, you know, against Mobijun. So I guess they weren't fully blocked. They just started to stagnate, and then they got out of there, and he was able to like build himself back up without Liu Qingge's help. That part to me was the only part that I was like, I thought his powers were stagnant. So how did he without Liu's help get back to normal? But maybe he didn't get back to normal, and that's why he just was kind of like off to the side. I don't know. I don't know for sure. But yeah, I liked in this moment that Yu Qingyan is a little bit more serious. Like, I've been calling him the dare officer because he's just very friendly and upbeat and like everything's all hunky-dory. But here, he does get a little bit more serious, and he's like, we can't open up the barriers, otherwise the monsters get out, we have to go in. And I remember in the donghua thinking that it was like suspicious that the Huanhua Palace people were trying to like corrupt everything, but here it just reads as like an oversight. And it's like, oh, the characters are dumb, so that's why it happened, right? My dog keeps wanting me to play with this toy, but I can't find where it is, so I'm sorry, Huckleberry. I've got to go on with the story. So, anyway, I also like that Liu Qingge is actually, you know, concerned for Shin Qingqiu. He's like, hey, you got poison. I don't know if you want to do that and walk around without it, you know, possibly acting up. So I like that he does care. He does show that he, like, you know, is considerate for Shin Qingqiu, and Shin Qingqiu is like, nah, I got this. We're all good. And that's when he gets the B points, right? I also love that Shin Qingqiu is like, are you just handing me a piece of candy? Really? 30 points? That's all I get for my heroic speech? He was great in this chapter set. Like, I love Shin's sarcasm. It is so funny. It's so biting, and it's great. Also, case in point to note, Shin Qingqiu is very knowledgeable of all of the demonic beasts that are in this story. Doesn't know like about the ladies, which you could determine it to mean that he's, you know, a sign that he's gay or a sign that he's asexual. But he knows a lot about them beasts, or that he's a monster fucker. So it seems like a multiple choice question on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. In the novel Scum Villain's Self-Saving System, Shin Qingqiu's character does not have a lot of knowledge about the female protagonist's harem, but does about the protagonist's female harem, but does have a lot of knowledge about the demonic beasts. What does this mean? A, he's gay. B, he's asexual. C, he's a monster fucker. D, he's all of the above. It's like, I don't think we had to phone a friend to figure out that one. But yeah. So there was a little note here about Shin Qingqiu's golden finger. His knowledge of the plot aside, if you had to call something his golden finger, it could only be this. So we've established that the golden finger is the idea that it's like their plot armor. It's what keeps them from immune to the plot. And so in this case, aside from Shin Qingqiu, because at this point, here's the thing. Shin Qingqiu thinks he knows the novel, he thinks he knows the plot, but with the events of this chapter set, that's going to get further and further diminished. He's not going to know the story because it's going to keep changing, right? The butterfly effects are already taking wing, right? But what does give Shin Qingqiu an advantage over other characters is he knows all the monsters. The plot events may change, but the monsters and their abilities are going to stay the same. So he kind of will, that's what he can use to his advantage that will get him out of bad situations. Love it. Nice. So meanwhile, they're like, everything's fallen into disarray. And I do love this image. I love this image of the night wind, like whipping around them, and the sight of Lo Binghe leaning up against a tree. His sword is like clasped in his hilt in his arms. He's calm yet alert, protecting them against any attacks that came from the darkness. And you can see Shin Qingqiu sees she couldn't stop a trace of fondness welling up within her. If Shin Qingqiu had been there, he would have incredibly excitedly said that you've fallen in love. But it doesn't go anywhere. So it's like, was she falling in love? Was she just fond that he was there protecting them? Who knows? Who knows? Meanwhile, so the human spider heads, I'm glad y'all didn't spoil it for me, because the way the donghua frames it, they're like, oh, the spider heads. They just like attach to your head like a face hugger, and then they just like suck out your essence. They suck out your spiritual, essence. It's very tame. It's very low key. It's perfectly fine. No, in this novel, they drill holes into your head and suck out your brains. I was like, oh, that's terrifying. That's a lot more threatening than the donghua, right? A lot more horrific than the donghua. I'm just saying. Yeah. And so it does lead to Shin Qingqiu's best arrival in the book thus far, where he just like, he shoots an arrow of pure energy through the spider, pierces and skewers a hole clean through it, and then he just like rubs his ears from hearing the screaming, shakes out his sleeves, and then snaps his fan, and he's like, oh, shut up. How could Lo Bing-hei not be excited? Right? How could he not? So yeah, and then I just love they have this little moment, and then we see them all fighting. Now, in the donghua, they really played up that he was like, your poor wife, I'm so sorry. And he's like, what are you talking about? Here, he's mainly just thinking it. But he's like, you guys need to protect yourselves. And they all, like, fight the ghost head spiders and manage to, like, weed them off. In this, we get to see them running away from the spiders. They use, what I like about it is, unlike the donghua, which I'm not going to write it up here at this point, but in the donghua, they were just, like, creeping out of the bushes. In the novel, I like that they like spindle down from the trees. Like they just spindle down like spiders from a tree. That's always the thing. If I'm mowing or taking my dogs out, I'll be like under a tree and then a spider will come down and I'll be like, ah. So it's a little bit creepier, I think, with them coming down out of the trees. And I also like the idea of Shin Ching-cho using his fan to blow them away. It feels very Windmaster from Heaven and Visual's Blessing. It's really good. I like it. But yes. So that's when his spiritual power starts to stagnate and he swiftly redirected the flow of his energy into a physical attack. So maybe that's what keeps him from getting completely plugged up in his spiritual power. He made it a physical attack instead at the last minute to redirect it and kind of, you know, misdirect and keep it from getting worse. And so Shin Ching-cho, but Lo Bing-hei notices it and I think can see what the poison is doing to him. He gets it. He's like, okay, we need to get out of here. And then they manage to... Now, here's where the donghua leaves off. In the midst of chapter 24. Donghua leaves off. We cross over the threshold. It's like crossing the barrier into where the Thousand Leaves Fresh Snow Lotus is like the moment you go past the donghua. And it's like, oh, here we are. So, we're in the land of this mythical flower, the Thousand Leaves Fresh Snow Lotus. It's in the depths of the Judy Gorge, and it's been here for thousands of years, and it's the bane of creatures in the demon realm. And it repels demonic beasts within its innate barrier. Now, my guess is that in this version, it's not as strong, especially against Lo Bing-hei and Mobejun, because here we have the flower. We get to where the flower is. And this becomes a source of great conflict at this point in the story. Because in the OG version, this is the flower that leads to him having sex with her, is finding that flower. I'm assuming that maybe she gets poisoned around the time that the ghost spider heads thing happens, and then he finds the flower, and that's when all that happens. Here, they find the flower, and Lo Bing-hei is halted by Shin Ching-cho. Because he's like, no, this is not where this is supposed to happen. And what's interesting about it is that I love that Shin Ching-cho says, stop, do not pass go. It reminded me of the drag queen Trinity the Tuck. She's like, alert, alert, alert. He's like, I'm not, the girl you're supposed to pick the flower for is right next to us watching. Do you want to deflower it in her presence for a big, stronger man to boot? I like that, one, Shin Ching-cho doesn't believe that he needs it. He's like, I don't need the poison, I'm fine. And he also doesn't think he needs the sex, which I'm so glad Shin Ching-cho says that, because even though he is poisoned, even though it could benefit him, I like that he has so much integrity that, one, he still thinks Lo Bing-hei is going to end up with her as a wife. And I'm like, dude, your obliviousness. But he's a gentleman. And also, I think it's important because he's like, no, you're still a kid, and I don't want to do that to you. And I'm like, thank you. Also, I mean, it would be dubious consent if he did, right? Because Lo Bing-hei would not realize that Shin Ching-cho would be totally taking advantage of him to get cured of his poison. And as much as I want to see Lo and Shin get together, I want it to be consensual, and I want it to be like on each other's terms and in the right way. And this would be just as bad as airplane shooting through the sky if we made it, if we inserted, no pun intended, Shin Ching-cho instead of Shin Wan Yu, it'd be the same situation. It would be kind of non-consensual. And plus, we just got done talking about how Shin Chingcho believes that Lo Binghe is too nice and lets himself be taken advantage of. And this moment would prove that. It'd be like, no. It's kind of like, I'm gonna do Heaven Official's Blessing spoilers this time. And when I wave my hand again, that's when those spoilers will be over, if you want to skip those. But the thing of it is, it would be kind of like in Heaven Official's Blessing when we're at the Land of the Lustrous, when we're in the cave, and it's pretty early on in the story, and there's all the flowers spreading like the sex pollen, and you have like Hong Air, who's now like who's now a teenager, kind of like Lo Binghe, and then you have Shi Lian, who's kind of like Shin Qingqiu, and they're both in compromising situations. It would basically be like if Shi Lian had sex with Hua Chong at that moment during the Land of the Tender. It would have been like that moment, not Land of the Lustrous, Land of the Tender. It would have been like that moment. As much as we want those two main characters to get together, it has to be at the right time. And MXTX knows that, and she kind of tests you as the audience to say, I know you want our two main characters to bone. I get that, but now is not the time. So just be patient with me. It'll all work out in the end. And this feels, into those spoilers, like that same type of moment. Like, as much as I want Lo Binghe and Shin Chingqiu to get together, now's not the time. And Shin Chingqiu's like, now's not the time. So he knows that there's still other things that need to happen with the plot, and this is not the situation of a fan servicey sex scene. But he's also kind of like, why are you bringing this up now? He doesn't realize just how deeply Lo Binghe loves him and wants to cure him, and he's just like, why are you bringing this up? It's not that big of a deal. And what's interesting is that Lo Binghe kind of challenges him. He's like, it can't do what you say. The flower's not going to work. And he's like, well, how do you know? Why don't we try? And then he's like, why has this master indulged you such that you think you can willfully fool around even at a time like this? And here's the thing. At this moment, it's kind of their first fight, which is so funny to me because in the OG version, there have been, mini fights. Mini fights, but in what's interesting is in the OG version, Shin Chingqiu was always dominant because he always had like a grip over Lo Binghe, and Lo Binghe was always kind of his servant and his disciple and was like, okay, I won't, talk against you or anything because you're probably going to hit me if I do. And Shin Chingqiu always was like laundering that over him. Here, this is like the first time in the story that Lo Binghe not only stands up to Shin Chingqiu with some logic that kind of rivals his a little bit, but it also is the one moment where they kind of like both meet eye to eye, and Shin Chingqiu's like, in that moment, the power of dominance kind of gets, the scales shift a little bit in Lo Binghe's favor, and I'm like, oh. So that's letting me believe that as this story goes on and Lo Binghe gets older, they're going to be on equal terms more, whatever happens if we get to that point, and they're going to meet eye to eye and have to work it out. Maybe, who knows what's going to happen at this point? I don't know. But it's like the first time that Lo Binghe actually stands up to Shin Chingqiu, and they have like a minor squabble, and it's like, oh, I mean, they'll have to make up later, maybe, who knows? But yeah, so he says over the past few years, Lo had never, Shin Chingqiu had never spoken to him with harshness, and Lo Binghe had never spoken up. So now this is the first time that they're kind of like looking at each other, like wondering what to do. Neither of them want to back down. So then, after that, comes this new guy, Shang Qinghua. Qinghua. There's a lot of Huas, there's a lot of Qings, but yeah, Shang Qinghua, who is with the Andongjing Peak, which is kind of like the most, on the Anding Peak. Yes, the Anding Peak. They're like the most mellow and vanilla of all the peaks, apparently. That's how it seemed to be to me in descriptions. But he's the mole for the demons, and he's the one responsible for everything going on. And he's kind of like a coward. We get a picture of him in the book. We actually get a picture of him and Mo Bei-jun, which I'm super excited about. He looks different than I thought he would. I was wondering how he would look. In the book, they show us this picture. Mo Beijun looks incredible. Mo Beijun looks badass. He looks awesome with this like long hair and the braid, and there's like ice crystals coming out from him. He looks great. Has like the little demonic crest on his forehead, kind of like Xia Hualing does. Has the ice blue eyes. He looks great. I wish we could have got him in the donghua. But Shang Qinghua, he with his little bun and his little short hair did not look how I thought. I was thinking more of like long hair and kind of slimy. Here he looks like a mole. So I guess that works. I guess that's fitting. But yeah. So he has his hair like tied up in a bun. And he's basically just kind of a slimy coward. And Shin Ching-cho knows. And what's funny is he kind of seems like how Shin Ching-cho was originally as the original flavor in the story. So I'm going to be curious to see, since Shin Ching-cho is different now in this new version, how that interaction with Shang Qinghua is going to be later on. That's going to be interesting. Interesting indeed. So yeah. So he basically asks, well, did you see a large demonic beast nearby? And Shang Qinghua's like, no, I did not. And that's when Shin Ching-cho's like, wait, what? So apparently there's supposed to be this big black moon rhinoceros python, which looks probably as ridiculous as it sounds. The fudge. My favorite part of this whole part was that its moonward howl is in enigmatic fashion described as like that of a python and a rhino. like of course it does. But what does that sound like? Like, does it sound like a freight train? Does it sound like this? That's like the most bland description ever. And I could just imagine Shin Ching-cho like slowly throwing his hand up to the sky, like airplane shooting towards the sky. Why couldn't your descriptions be better without a cure poison? Just, I was like, oh my gosh. So seed mode. Activate seed mode, which is, to me, I know it's referencing Mobile Suit Gundam Seed, which my brother knows about. I don't know much about that series. My brother's a big fan. I don't know if I'll ever watch it. We'll see one day. I was thinking of a seed activating, like a seed bursting open, which is the same idea, that Lo is exposing himself, right? This is how Lo reveals his demonic heritage. So it says Lo exposes himself to Shin Ching-cho, and then Shin Ching-cho has the excuse to strike him down to eliminate him for the sake of justice, and him striking him down enables Lo Binghe to level up. So, in the original, like, Lo Binghe fighting the rhino, the fight reveals his demonic heritage, and the reveal gives Shin Ching-cho the excuse to strike him, I guess at the abyss, and enact the events. Well, now that is getting replaced with Mo Beijun, with old MJ here. Old MJ is replacing this strategy, and it's a lot different. We'll talk about that. But yeah, so what's also interesting in this is that Shang Qinghua talks about, you know, about how it's so awful what's happened to all the disciples and everything. And Shin Ching-cho's like, well, weren't you the one that released the creatures? What if he wasn't? I'm sure that he was, and I'm sure that they're going to maybe talk about that at some point in the next set of chapters or in volume 2, but what if he wasn't the one that released the creatures? What if the novel's changed in that respect too? Shin Ching-cho thinks he has it figured out, but I'm like, does he? And so then this earthquake happens, the abyss opens up, and with the abyss opening, Shin Ching-cho is like, who's coming out from it, right? Something demonic would appear from the other side. So I guess in the original novel, it was the black moon rhinoceros python. Here, it's Mo Beijun. The problem is, he's not supposed to show up until 500 chapters later. 500 chapters later! What? Which, I know that the events with Ning Ying Ying, like, accounted to, like, 30 chapters in the original. That's terrifying. So we're just chopping whole entire bits of story out from the original, which is why this is going to get done in 4 volumes instead of like 20,000. But yeah, so he shows up 500 chapters early. I feel like that moment was just MXTX telling us, oh, you think that the events are going to vary slightly from the OG? Oh, no. They're going to change a lot from here on. And I'm like, yeah, they're going to change a lot, because this guy that's not supposed to like show up until a long time, like 3 years in the plot later, shows up now. And it's like, oh, and he's the one that tests Lo Binghe, which Shin Ching-cho is like, well, this will work out in my favor, because I was sitting here wondering, how do I toss him into the abyss if there's no reason to toss him into the abyss? If he doesn't reveal himself, what am I going to do? And this fight with Mobae-jun allows him to have a reason now. We're back on track. The story's back on track, right? I'm going to be curious if he questions the self-saving system, why Mobae-jun is showing up so early, and if the system is like, there's no mistakes, this is the story now. I'm gonna be really curious, right? So Shang Qinghua gets flung into the air, and Mobae-jun, you know, reveals that he thinks that Shang Qinghua is not the, here we'll get to that point here where he talks about the immortal who's not immortal and the demon who's not a demon. We'll get to that point here in just a second. But he flings Shang Qinghua into a tree. And Shang Qinghua is like, well, who is this distinguished one? Why have you come to this place? And Shin Qingcho's like, well, isn't that your real boss? Wasn't he the one that ordered you to release the dangerous creatures? No, go right ahead and keep pretending. What if he's not pretending? What if he's really asking and isn't the one that did that? I don't know. If some of his actions feel like he really does get knocked out and like he really is in a situation, and maybe he's just a really good actor and Shin Ching-cho knows he's acting, but what if the story has changed? I guess when he wakes up, Shin Ching-cho can ask him, so we've still got to get to that point, but anyway, so after he pays respects, he sighs back again, and Shin Ching-cho is like a demon, and he knows exactly what he's up against. And he tells Lo Binghe to stand down, but Lo Binghe is trying to shield Shin Ching-cho. And that's when Shin Ching-cho realizes, oh, he's the substitute for the rhinoceros python. Because he says the immortal acts unlike an immortal, and the demon acts unlike a demon. Interesting. Now, the thing of it is, I feel like the demon acting not like a demon is referring to Lo Binghe. I think that that Shin Ching-cho had that completely correct. When I first heard him say that line, I thought he said the immortal acts unlike an immortal. I thought he was talking about Shin Ching-cho. I thought he was talking about Shin Ching-cho, who is supposed to be immortal, so he doesn't need, you know, Lo Binghe protecting himself. He doesn't need to protect Lo Binghe. I thought he was, like, referring to Shin Ching-cho, like, not acting like himself. But Shin Ching-cho thinks that he's referring to Shang Qinghua, so I guess we'll find out, right? The problem is that Shin Ching-cho is slowly becoming an unreliable narrator. He's slowly becoming unreliable because the things that he says are the plot lines are not happening in order anymore, if at all. So who's to say? I feel like it's going to get to the point where we can't rely on Shin Ching-cho to give us the plot anymore because it's not going to be happening in that same order. So I don't know. But I like that he was thinking about how he could see if Mobae-jun could really see his bloodline with a single glance or not. And then Lo Binghe is like, he's not going to let any of us go. It'd be better if we use all our strength to fight this battle. And when Shin Ching-cho said that'd be really fucking useless, he's like, you're going to lose your life. And Lo Binghe says, well, dying for Shizun or dying together with you is something that I would gladly do. And Shin Ching-cho doesn't get to reply to that before Mobae-jun speaks up. He doesn't get reply to that, but Lo Binghe does make the comment, I might as well put it here, that he would die with or for Shin Ching-cho. My thing is, what are we going to do with that once he goes down into the abyss? Next chapter is going to be the abyss. I'm sure it is. We're here. The chapter is called part 1 and part 2 of it. So Shin Ching-cho is probably going to throw him into the abyss. but what's the circumstance going to be? And is Lo Binghe going to feel completely betrayed by Shin Ching-cho and completely change his attitude around him? I don't think that that would be the case. Or is he going to, like, is Shin going to be able to say something before he pushes him down into the abyss, being like, I'm sorry I had to do this, come find me later or something, or have pity on me and forgive me and do that, and then what do we do? So I don't know how Lo Binghe is going to react to this. I don't want him to treat Shin Ching-cho like the villain, but I don't know if he's going to feel betrayed, and then it is going to set it into motion like that. I don't know. And I'm terrified of it, okay? So he says, in 3 years, Lo Binghe will be able to single-handedly beat you, and you'll become his diligent henchman. You really would be slapping your own face. So I feel like maybe Mo Bae-jun and the others, Lo Binghe, are going to come back and defeat later and use them to help him win back Shin Ching-cho. I don't know. In any case, Mo Bae-jun manages to hurt Shin Ching-cho, and that is what activates Lo Binghe. Now, it says here that he not only, like, he fights back against Mo Bae-jun's attacks, but he gets pissed off that Mo Bae-jun hurt Shin Ching-cho. And I love the description of the, like, black ice shattering against the moonlight. Like, that's beautiful, right? I love it. I love how it's described. It'd be so cool to see in the donghua if they had a budget and were able to do it. But I like that Mo Bae-jun says, unusually inferior talent. Foundation and techniques inflexible, leave. And Shin Ching-cho's like, well, he's not some unmatched genius, but his talent was at least 1 in 1,000. He's like, Mo Bae-jun still described them as if he was a pile of garbage. And he's like, well, if the original Flavor heard this, he would have coughed up and ran away. But Shin Ching-cho's not running away, right? Which is a big difference as well. He's not going to back down from the fight, which is, again, a difference of him running, which I can't really put that on there because Mo Bae-jun doesn't appear in the original one, so he may have ran from him, but he didn't actually in the original story, so we can't entirely include that. This is getting complicated real quickly, and I'm like, oh no, uh-oh. So then, when did he break his sword? I want to go back up to that. He said Mo Bae-jun spared one hand to flick away the white sword glare he threw, and Zhang Yang couldn't withstand the influx of demonic energy, and an explosion of white light shattered into pieces. Okay, so Lo Binghe's original sword is broken. Okay, so in this version, I'm assuming in both ones, Lo Binghe's sword breaks, except it was with a rhino, and here it was with Mo Bae-jun. So the sword breaks either way, which he's going to get a new sword when he goes into the abyss, so that's not going to matter. But he doesn't care that his sword's broken. When he saw Shin Ching-cho injured by the palm strike, his gaze frosted over and his aura changed in an instant. So, here's the thing. The two blades, like, all these blades come flying out, and Shin's, like, sitting there snarling as a sword array. So, Mo Bae-jun starts sending the swords towards Shin Ching-cho, being like, oh, you like him? Oh, you don't want me to hurt him? Here, I'll hurt him. And Lo Binghe jumps in front. So the means of Lo Binghe's seal unveiling is different. In the OG one, Lo Binghe, it was his bloodlust as well as proving himself and his strength against the rhino that unlocked his demonic energy. And it was just like, because it seems like the original Lo Binghe was like, trying to protect everybody, but also trying to prove himself and prove his strength. It wasn't connected to Shin Ching-cho in any way, shape, or form at all. Here, it was, he unlocked the seal because he wanted to protect Shin Ching-cho and keep him safe. Which, I don't know, because if Shin Ching-cho ends up throwing him into the abyss in the next chapter set, and Lo Binghe, you know, he did this to save him, it's like, how's he going to respond to that? So, I'm really worried. I'm really worried about it, damn it! I'm really worried. And so, Shin Ching-cho, He snarled within his heart. I've done my best, but he still thinks I'm trash. What do I do? If I have to die, can I at least be better looking? And then he's saved by Lo Binghe, and he has all this demonic energy, but the seal had yet to be removed. He was just testing him, but the demonic energy is overflowing. So he makes it sound like in the original, was the seal not broken? Was the seal not broken in the original? And here, Mo-Bae-Jun did break it? I mean, that wouldn't surprise me because Mo-Bae-Jun is a lot stronger than the rhinoceros python, so that wouldn't surprise me if he ends up breaking it, but so what do we do about that? How does that work? Yeah. Then we have the seal is yet to be removed, but the battle darkened the sky and earth, blotting out all the light. The raging waves of demonic energy overflowed from both of them enough to cloak the entire sky. And then they bring up this. Wasn't this area within the range of the 1,000 Leaves Fresh Snow Lotus? That was what it was called, right? The demonic creatures were supposed to be afraid to approach its proximity, but as soon as this inescapable smog of demonic chi touched the flower, the snow lotus that brimmed with spiritual chi wilted and rotted down to its roots. And then all of these monsters started showing up. So yeah, it's like before the slightly less powerful demons were all driven away by the flower, but here the flower rots. So now it can't save anybody. It can't stop anybody's poison. So the flower's gone. So how do we save Chin Ching Cho from his poison now? And that means he's not going to have sex with Chin Wan Yu. What? So all these monsters start coming out, and then he sends this, he was done testing, and he sends this stream of scarlet light to the center of Lo Bing's forehead, and it basically takes off the seal, and he throws the strike back against Mo-Bae-Jun. And he says, the human realm isn't where you belong. Why not return to your origins? And then he's like, he'd done a far more thorough job. He removed the seal. He'd basically bypassed something, I guess. Okay. Well. And so the seal, the flower rots, and all the monsters show up. Y'all need to see Conspiracy Board Sama because he looks pretty busy right now. He's about to get a lot busier. I'll have to post a picture on Discord to show where we're at because, oh my god. Yeah. Yep. Okay. Ah! I've talked for a good hour about this. Yeah. So, I don't know if I'm going to be able to wait. As much as I'd love to wait on your comments, we have one more section left before Volume 2. So, I may go ahead and read the rest of Volume 1 for next week, which will be chapters 27, through chapters 27 through 30, pages 244 to 291, which is going to be a big-ass section of pages. So, it's going to be even more pages than this week. So... But I want to finish the novel, and I want to see what happens. And so I'm going to update Conspiracy Board Sama. I'm going to get myself prepared. And I'm going to come back next week with the last chapters of Volume 1 of Scum Villain's Self-Saving System. And see what all happens now that the seal's been completely removed. And go from there. So, I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and yeah, I'm back next week with even more of Scum Villain's Self-Saving System.